Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Irene and today we're going to be talking about how to land a retail job. I know it sounds simple, but when you're actually in the process it can be a little bit difficult, it can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes even confusing. There are some tips and tricks that can increase your chances in getting the job. Summer's coming around, school's out, and everyone's gonna be looking for a job, and what better time to put this video out than now. Okay, without further ado, let's jump right in. The first step is, of course, to apply. One of the biggest tips that I can share for job searchers is to keep track of the jobs you've applied for. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. It could be handwritten, or you can even put on a spreadsheet like Excel. The only details that you really need are 1, the company, of course, 2, the position you've applied for, 3, the job posting number or the requisition number, and number 4 is the date that you applied. It's important to have the date that you applied so you can follow up with the retailer, the employer, the organization at least a week after you've applied. So you want to have that date just so you can reference back and you're not following up too soon or too late. Okay, so now it's time for you to start following up with your applications. You want to go ahead and go back to your tracker and look at the date applied and make sure that at least a week has passed from that date. Then you give them a call and say, hey, can I speak to a manager, please? You're transferred to a manager and you just say, hey, this is Irene so-and-so. I applied on this date for this position, and I just wanted to follow up on the status of my application. It's really that simple. That's actually how I got my first position. I applied online and I called a week later and I said, hey, can I speak to the hiring manager? I said that exact same sentence that I just said to you guys, and she said, sure, do you want to come in for an interview tomorrow? And I was like, oh, of course I do. And I ended up getting the job right then and there on the spot. So just make sure you follow up. That's really helpful. That shows employers that you're really interested. Now comes the interview. Whether you followed up and they offered you an interview or they reached out to you and offered an interview, how you got the interview does not matter anymore. What matters is that number 1, you're prepared. Number 2, you're dressed for the part. And number 3, you have some solid answers already ready in your mind. The first thing is you have to make sure you're prepared. One time I had an interview with BCBG Max Azria, which is kind of like a high-end clothing store, and the manager that interviewed me, she was so impressed that she's like, nope, you need to talk to my district manager. And that's when things went bad. The first question the district manager asked me was, do you know what BCBG stands for? And I didn't. It was completely my fault. I should have known, I should have done the research, but I didn't. Going back to that, my number 1 tip is make sure you're prepared. I know some of us can get in the tendency of just applying for any position, any company, anything, any job opening that we see, we apply because we need a job so bad. But we don't realize that when it comes time for the interview, we actually need to know about that company and about the position in order to get hired. It's very important to do your research and to know about the company. And even if they don't ask you, if you kind of embed that in your answer, that's amazing because it shows them that you did your research without them having to ask you about it. Number 2, make sure you dress the part. When I got the interview for Tilly's, I called the manager back and I said, hey, how should I dress? And she said, dress like you're coming to work at Tilly's. So you need to kind of dress like you're already a part of the team. Now, this only applies to retail. So just take what I'm saying for retail only. It's not a bad thing to ask. If you don't know how you should dress, definitely by all means, go ahead and ask. I think the employer would appreciate that much more rather than you going dressed completely wrong and completely opposite than how you should have been dressed. And number 3, make sure you have some answers already ready. Kind of like how I said, study the organization, study the retailer, and kind of embed it in your answers without them asking you. If you have some answers ready, so for example, we know that most employers ask, well, tell me about yourself, or what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? You should already have those answers prepared rather than saying,
That's a good question. Let me think about that one and then get back to you.
That's not good. You don't want to sound robotic on one hand, and it's like you don't want to have your answers memorized. On the other hand, you don't want to sound unprepared. You should prepare for your interviews. That's absolutely, you should prepare. One of the most important things is customer service. Make sure you focus on customer service a lot and connecting with the customer, especially in retail, it's like number one. So that's the interview process. Now at the end of the interview, the employer almost always asks, regardless of organization, regardless of industry, they almost always ask, do you have any questions for me? Why, yes, I do. You should never, ever, ever, ever let that opportunity go. You should always ask a question, because if you don't ask a question, then you're not interested. You should always, before your interview, prepare some questions for your interviewer and let them know through your questions that you're interested. Even if it's during the interview, let's say they say something that you have a question on, go ahead and ask it. That kind of shows them that you were listening during the interview. So it's very, very important to ask a question to your interviewer. So all in all, those are a couple of my tips on getting a job at retail. It's pretty easy, but if you put in these tricks like following up, being prepared, mentioning the organization in the interview, showing you've done your research can really make you stand out from all the other candidates that may not have done that research or may not have been as prepared as you were. Please comment some of your best interview secrets, or did you learn anything? Which one was your favorite secret or tip or hack or trick or whatever you want to call it? Comment down what your favorite one was and comment what you do, or if you've had any funny interview stories. I hope you laughed a little at my interview mishaps. So awful, but it's okay, you live and you learn. If you did enjoy this video, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment and share and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! I just almost died. I'll give you some tips and trips. Tips and trips? I wish I could give you trips. I wish I could give myself a trip.